All right, picture this. It's a normal day, and you've gone downstairs to get your mail out of the mailroom. You open your mailbox, peer inside, and you see the usual, something for your roommate, something that's advertising, something that you don't want, a bill, maybe something from your mom. But wait, there's something different. You pull out an envelope addressed to you, and you don't recognize the address in the top left corner. So you don't even wait to go upstairs, just slide it open, and it's an invitation to a formal brunch, and oh my goodness, the VP of that company that you've been wanting to get into, he's going to be there. There will be a lot of situations in which you will be in a formal dining situation, and we want to make sure that you know some tips and tricks for how to handle yourself in those situations. So we're going to outline before, during, and after to help you get a feel of that.
Now, the first thing to remember is that when you receive that invitation, it's important to RSVP promptly if an RSVP is requested. If you're unsure about the dress for the occasion, it's also a good time to ask. You need to remember that confirming for a small lunch meeting, either the day ahead or the day of, if it's in the afternoon, is really important so that you're sure to arrive promptly and at the right place. When you arrive, make sure you're there about 5 to 10 minutes early. Ladies, now is a good time to blot your lipstick before you enter the restaurant so this doesn't happen. Make sure you turn your cell phone off or put it on vibrate. Texting will not be happening at this event.
Would everyone please stand up, push their chair in, and stand behind their chair. All right, remember that brunch that you got invited to? You're there. You look around, notice the people around you, and take a seat. Now, how many of you had to wait and try to figure out who's going to go in first and who's going to take the space? A couple? Well, according to proper etiquette, you're supposed to enter your chair from the right side, like this. Also, a gentleman should notice a lady to his right and help her be seated with her chair. Once you're sitting down, make sure you know everyone at the table. So introduce yourself to people that you don't know. You could also use time while you're standing to introduce yourself to other people. Place your briefcase or purse underneath your seat, and make sure you use proper posture. Your shoulders should be back, both feet should be flat on the floor, and don't put your elbows on the table.
So now you're seated. And if you're in a formal dining setting, your place setting might be a little bit crowded, as you can see from the handout that we gave you. So just remember that your water glass is going to be on your right, and the plate for your bread or your salad will be on the left. When you order, don't comment on the costs or the price of the items on the menu. If you have any allergies, it's totally okay to pull the waiter aside when she gets to you and just ask about any ingredients. That's fine. But it's important to remember to not order alcohol at most events that are formal, especially at interview settings, things like that. Now, we want to talk about a few special situations like bread, salad, soup, things like that. The correct way to eat bread is to take a piece of bread out of the basket and place it on your bread plate. You then pass the basket to the right. The butter is taken from the butter plate to your bread plate by way of the butter knife. You do not use the butter knife to spread your bread, to spread the butter on the bread. Instead, you use your bread knife, if you have one, and you break off a bite-sized piece of bread and put the butter on that piece alone. So don't cut the piece of bread in half and butter one side and then lift the whole piece of bread in your mouth. Make sure you only use bite-sized pieces. Salad. When eating salad, Make sure that you cut the lettuce into bite-sized pieces so that you're not struggling with long pieces of lettuce or huge iceberg lettuce. Also, if you encounter olives with pits in them, you can simply return the pit to your plate by way of your fork. This might seem a little tricky, so it's a good idea to practice things like that in advance. Soup. When eating soup, you use your spoon and scoop away from you, and then lift it to your mouth. So instead of scooping towards you, scoop away from you. It's all right to tip the bowl when you get towards the end as well. When you begin eating, sorry, and I forgot to talk about the napkin. This will happen before you begin your bread. You should typically wait until your host places the napkin on his lap, but if you don't see the host do this, make sure that you put the napkin on your lap before you begin to eat. When the main entree arrives, it's polite to wait for your host to begin eating. But if you order an appetizer like soup or something that's hot, it's all right to begin before the other guests have received theirs.
When you see a bunch of silverware, a good rule of thumb is to start from the outside and work your way in. So you'll notice on the handout that you have a salad fork and then an entree fork. You'll have your knife and your spoon for your soup. Anything that's above the plate is going to be for dessert. There are two main styles with which to use your silverware. There's the American style and the continental or European style. With the American style, you will cut up a few pieces of your food and then take small bites with your right hand. So you place the knife on your plate with the blade facing in before you transfer the fork from your left to your right hand. With the continental style, the fork remains in your left hand the entire time and the tines face downward. If someone asks you for the salt or the pepper, pass both at the same time. Also, taste your food before you season it. This way, you won't insult your host, and you won't end up with mashed potatoes that were once salty but are now inedible. Make sure you show consideration to your server. They'll be serving you from the left to begin with, and then they'll be refilling from the right, and also removing your plate from the right. But it's not necessary to say thank you after each course is delivered. If your food, sometimes things happen, and say you're eating, and your fork decides to jump ship. Do you go get it? No. You leave it on the floor and ask your server discreetly for a new one. Likewise, if you encounter a dirty glass, you can discreetly ask your server for a new one.
One other tip. If food happens to fall on the floor, it's perfectly acceptable to leave it there. But if food falls on your placemat, use your fork to pick up the food and set it on the side of your plate. When the meal is over, make sure that you don't leave your silverware scattered across your plate in a messy fashion. Instead, simply line the silverware up together and put it between 4 and 5 o'clock. Your napkin should be placed beside you, not on your chair. And when you rise, make sure you scoot your chair in. Now is a good time to thank your host for inviting you to this event and also to shake hands with any other guests that you may have met before the meal or that you had a good conversation with during the meal. You can also trade business cards at this time if you like.
It was nice to meet you, Christina.
Pleasure to meet you too, Abby. The rules of etiquette that we've just brought to you are just a brief overview, and they're really meant to make you feel more comfortable in a dining situation, not more uncomfortable. Remember the purpose of the meal. This is important so that you know if you need to bring anything, you need to be prepared with certain materials, especially for a business meeting. And it also is a good idea to try and figure out who might be attending these events. That will make sure that you arrive confident in who you're going to meet and prepared in what you're going to say. It's also important to be discreet. That's a key word for this presentation. Discretion is really important. And finally, just be comfortable in how you handle yourself. Be discreet, be comfortable, and make sure that you're just being considerate of your host and the people around you.
Thank you. Okay, great. Questions for the Miss Manners that we have in front of us here?
I believe you said in your presentation that water glasses go out on the right, and it's actually the opposite on this handout, so I just want clarification.
On the right side of your plate.
On the right side of the plate.
Your drink will be to your right and your bread plate will be to your left.
Okay.
So the water glass, yeah, will be on the right-hand side.
But not on the far right of the glasses.
Right, the
Yeah.
water
Okay.
number one.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so usually your glasses and anything that will hold liquids will be on the right-hand side, and then things that will hold solids, so like salad and bread and things like that will be on the left.
How do you politely go to the bathroom mid-meal?
You can simply excuse yourself to the people on your left. Make sure that you do that very politely if you're in a conversation, and if possible, wait till it's come to maybe a pause. One thing that we didn't mention, a particular situation where you would need to excuse yourself to the bathroom is when you need to blow your nose or wipe your nose. You should not do that with your napkin. If you need to do that, make sure that you go to the restroom. If you're coughing though, do use your napkin to cover your mouth.
I've read somewhere that when you get up, you're supposed to like, if it's mid-meal, you like cross your silverware so the waiter knows that you're not finished when you're gone.
You're coming back.
Yeah, that's totally fine. When you put your silverware at about a 4 o'clock degree angle, that tells the waiter that you're finished with your meal. So anywhere besides there.
Okay.
If you don't want a certain kind of drink, like you don't want any alcohol or you don't want any coffee, what's the proper way to signal that?
Yeah. Well, the proper way to signal that is, first of all, to not flip your wine glass upside down.
Yep.
But what you could do is just discreetly say no thank you when they come to pour you wine, but it's better to just not draw attention to yourself if they do, so simply just not drink it. It's
Okay.
perfectly fine.
Okay. Other etiquette questions?
Are there any specific questions? Because we left the presentation a little bit shorter just because we feel like etiquette oftentimes makes us uncomfortable because of those more specific questions and not necessarily because of the general thing. So are there any questions that you might have specifically that we can answer? Certain situations?
Is it like a general rule to like just let the host kind of lead it? So like if he orders dessert and it's like, oh yeah, I'll have a coffee as well.
That's
and
a
stuff
really
like
good
that.
general rule.
Okay.
This will be important if you're in other countries, especially, to kind of take your cue from your host if you're unsure about different eating styles. It's important to know whether or not you should take off your jacket or not, based on whether your host does. So that's a really good rule of thumb to just kind of follow what your host is doing. And one other thing, if you're at an interview, it's a good idea to wait till your host asks you to be seated before you sit down. But if they don't say anything, it's okay to go ahead and sit down.
An exception to waiting for your host would be if hot food is served. It's appropriate to go ahead and start eating your soup before everyone is served.
Yeah.
Who's been in a situation like this where they've been dining for a business purpose? Has anyone actually been in that situation?
Yeah.
It wasn't really a business situation?
Well, it was kind of an interview sort of thing.
Okay.
And so it was like 10 of us all having a dinner. And we all had to like answer questions.
I see. Okay. How did you feel in that situation? I mean, for those of you who've been in that situation, did you feel comfortable? Did you encounter problems?
Yeah, my mom enrolled me in cotillion when I was like really young, and so like they like teach you all that.
Oh,
And so it was like exactly like this too, and so I sort of knew what I was doing. But it was still sort of weird, all of us around the table trying to do the same thing again.
Matt, you were in that situation?
No.
Your question, okay.
When you leave the table midway through, should you put your napkin on your, like next to your service or on your chair? Because I've heard different things.
I was under the impression initially that you were supposed to put it in your chair, but after this research, they said you should never put your napkin like on the seat. You should just set it beside your plate.
Okay, great. Thanks for the questions, guys. Thank you for the presentation. Please.